Great. Welcome. It is 5:53. Happy New Year, everyone. Chair of the HSPD, I'm calling the January 7th, 2025 meeting of the Historic Site Preservation Board to order now. May we please have the roll call?
Yes. Chair Nelson.
Pardon.
Vice Chair Rosenau.
Present.
Member Hanson.
Present.
Member Bachman. Was absent. Member Hare.
Present.
Member Rossi.
Here.
And member here.
Thank you so much. Now may we please have staff reports on the posting of the agenda.
Yes. The agenda for today's meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall bulletin board on the west side of City Council chambers, and the planning department counter in accordance with the city's policies.
Great. Does the board have any revisions for the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, may I please have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Great.
Second.
We have a motion by Vice Chair Rosenau and a second by Member Hare. Is there any discussion on that? Nope. Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nope. Motion passes to all right, we will move ahead now with public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the HSPD on agenda items and items of general interest within our subject matter jurisdiction. Although we value your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, we generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes of silence for each public comment speaker. Any testimony for public hearings will be taken at the time of those hearings. Does anyone requested to comment on a non-public hearing item?
No public comments were submitted for non-public, non-public items.
Okay, and anyone in our audience who wishes to make public comments? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and proceed to our next item, which is the consent calendar, where we have one item, the draft minutes on December 3rd, 2024. So I will just if anyone has any questions on the minute or revision? Okay, and I'll need a motion to approve that minute.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second that. Thank you. So we have a motion by Member Hare and a second by Chair Nelson to approve the minutes of December 3rd, 2024. Good. Moving along.
Yes, Jay, we do have to vote for that.
Pardon?
Can we do the vote?
Yes, yes, my apologies. Yeah, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
I abstain, I was absent.
Oh, okay, 5, 2, 1. Thank you. So next time would be item 4, unfinished business, of which we have none. So we'll move on to item 5, which is open business. And item 5A is a request by Spot on Ventures LLC on behalf of its subsidiary SOVPF Hotel Owner LLC, represented by O2 Architecture, for approval of a major alteration to a Class 4 site located at 1973 North Pumpkin Drive, and the associated review for potential redesignation of a Class 4 site to a Class 1 or 2 historic resource. The recommendation is to take no action and allow the processing of the proposed alteration and to determine if it's going to speak or if this action is not a project. So maybe please have the staff report.
Yes, and I do want to make a really quick announcement just before I begin. We were notified by the IT department, just letting us know that there is an internet service that is planned, a network maintenance service planned for 8 p.m. today. So if we go beyond 8 p.m., we will be, our meeting would be interrupted, but I didn't want to just put that on the radar. And then we can go ahead and start. All right, so the first item that is before HSBB today is the major alteration request for a Class 4 site at the address 1973 North Palm Canyon Drive. The site is currently occupied by the Days Inn, and it also includes the former Rick's restaurant, which was easily viewable from that North Palm Canyon Drive side. We look at the aerial view of the site. The property is a little over 4 acres and it contains 6 detached structures. The applicant is re-envisioning the site by demolishing 3 of the existing buildings and modifying the remaining 3 and building some new buildings and reconfiguring the landscape design as well as the parking configuration. Pursuant to section 8.05.130, the proposed scope for demolition does trigger the HSBB review to assess the property prior to the demolition to see if it meets the criteria to be reclassified as a historic site. Again, that aerial photo on the slide that you see shows the extent of the property, the parking configurations that wraps around the periphery of the site, and the layout of the 6 structures. This is a photo that was taken of the entrance to the site from the northern parking lot. Here you can see the 2-story building that abuts this parking lot. You can also see some of the building details along with the conduit and things that have been strapped onto the facades over time. Provided in your packet material is a comprehensive history outlining the development of the site, which started in the 1930s. The slides shown here is an aerial view of the site from 1965. It's also in your packet. And you can see the building footprints of the 6 buildings that we see on the site today. One thing to note here is the drive aisles and the parking that was that bisected the site. Originally, you can see that parking spaces were configured so that you can park right in front of the unit that you were staying at. Today, we see that area was converted into open landscape. The 6 buildings again are arranged on the site, with the first building constructed in 1937 and the 2 buildings designed by Arnett and Davis in 1961. Outside of the 2 1961 structures, all buildings have been altered from their original design. When we look at the evolution of the site, it starts in 1930. And it's really apparent that there has been a compilation of various visions over time that contributes to the lack of cohesiveness that we can see when we're walking through the site. The buildings are numbered here. I apologize that the text is a little small, but one shows the 1937 building, which was altered in 61. It was stripped down of its defining characteristic elements of a Pueblo revival style of architecture. Buildings 2, 3, and 4 were all built in the 1950s, and they have been heavily altered and modified, and some of them are in a state of disrepair. Building 5, 6 that you see labeled on the slide here have changed little, but are clearly from a different vision from the site and are in need of updates. I couldn't resist putting this stuff in our slides. It is in your packet, but when you take a closer look at buildings, the 2 buildings from 1961, the historic report references the master plan by Arnett and Davis, which envisioned a very large-scale hotel and convention center for the site. And of this ambitious master plan, only 2 buildings were actually constructed and conceived, and the remaining buildings were modified on the site. Again, you can identify the 2 buildings that were constructed, but they were part of, even some of the smaller design elements were really there as a linkage to the rest of the master plan, which was unfortunately not realized. Wait, we can keep it on that slide. Oh, I'm sorry, the next slide. So when we look at the criteria for historic designation as a class 1 site, the site must possess exceptional historic significance by meeting one or more of the criteria listed here. Staff's analysis reviewed the entire site as a whole and find that the remnants of what remains of the buildings requested for demolition no longer represent or retain historic significance and lacks a connection to any events, master designers, and it really has become a little bit confusing. The two structures that are tied to the firm Arnett and Davis contain architectural detailing that allude to the Googie style of architecture, yet staff finds that the two structures do not rise to that level of significance that fully portrays the style of architecture. And again, it is sad to say that it was not maybe the star of the show for the actual master plan that was envisioned. Next slide. When it comes to the analysis of integrity, again, the property reflects a very long range of styles and development patterns, but it does fail to provide that comprehensive narrative of history, and many aspects of the materials and the design integrity have been compromised over time. As a screening process for the projects for assessing a site's eligibility for reclassification, HSPB has the option to either stay the project to undertake historic designation proceedings on the site, or decide that the site in its current condition does not meet the requirements for reclassification, therefore take no action. I do want to remind us that in regards to the CEQA, either decision would not constitute this review by HSBB as a project as defined in section 15378. So based on the submitted application, the applicant proposes to retain the two buildings by Arnett and Davis and the 1937 structure as part of their revitalization of the site, but has not indicated any desire to designate the site. Staff finds that the site in its current condition does not meet the qualifications for redesignation and recommends that the HSBB take no action on this proposal. With that, I'm going to conclude my staff presentation of the staff report and can take any questions. The applicant team, I did see walk in. They are also here to take any questions if HSBB would like to ask them any clarifying questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Before we invite the applicant up, does the board have any questions of staff based on that report? Okay, great. We'd like to invite the applicant up now.
I'd like to come up. Good evening, members, and thank you for that wonderful staff report. It doesn't leave a lot of holes in what we're doing, in addition to, having each of you out on site and personally walking the project with you. Appreciate everybody's time and diligence on this. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If somebody wants my personal take on the project as we've evolved over the last 6 months working on it, I'm happy to talk to you.
Thank you. We all know who you are, but if you could just take your name, put it back in.
Yeah, Lance O'Donnell, O2 Architecture.
Thank you. Does the board have a question? What we got today? No? Okay. Oh, you. Okay, I guess now we'll open it up for discussion. Vice Chair Rosenau, please.
Thank you for the tour the other day. I think you did explain really well what we were looking at. I've been by it a billion times and never gone all the way to the back, so it was a great tour. The report that you guys provided as well was really thorough. Enjoyed reading it, but it puts together to me a picture of something that you don't need to worry about the historical site wise, and I think that I will go with staff's recommendation on this one.
Yes, I would second Eric's comments. Thank you.
There you go.
Well, I have some different thoughts about it. Army and Davis are amongst the most important Southern California architects in the modern style of the post-war period. They're primarily known for their Boogie style of architecture, but they did many other interpretations of modernism in buildings of every type. Every commercial style, they did churches, they did all sorts of things. And they are master architects. And in Steve Keelan's report, he does say that under criteria 5A and 5B, that there are exceptional architectural elements and design features that are of significance. So that was, but he says overall, he doesn't believe that the property qualifies under Class 1 site as a Class 1 site. So this is why it's confusing for me. Just looking, the issue of the project itself, I guess the reason why we're discussing this at all is because there's a project, right, proposed. So we have to evaluate this based on the fact that there's a project. So given the project that's been proposed, it appears that the two key buildings, are they 4 and 5? The ones that are made designed in 61, they 4 and 5?
I think we all used a different numbering conventions, but yeah, in the presentation that was shown, it was 5 and 6.
Well, 5 and 6, okay. Those, from my understanding of the proposal, are respectful of the original Army and Davis design, such that the key character defining elements of those buildings are retained, which I think is extremely important. Now the question is, if it does not go through the process of determining whether or not it qualifies to be a Class 1 historic site, what happens if the project changes for whatever reason? After we've said, well, it looks like the key issues or the key buildings are going to be retained, their features are going to be retained, that sounds great. And then 6 months from now, for whatever reason, financial reasons, there's lots of other reasons can occur, architect leaves in a huff, who knows what can happen? And design can be changed. So what then happens?
So, I mean, just to go back on the way that we are assessing the project, I think we are assessing if the site itself needs to be designated or not. We're not assessing the design of the project. And I know that those details have been provided and that they are planning to keep certain features and aspects of the two structures, which is all seen as additional information for us. But I think the role for HSCB today is to determine if that's enough to stay the project and say that because of these two structures, we need to stay the entire project and designate the entire site or not. I think in that regard, we're kind of pulling ourselves out of assessing the proposal that they're presenting, and we're looking at the site itself and the two buildings that kind of rise to more character, and seeing if that's enough to say we need to designate the site. If we, and I can add, if the board decides to take no action, the applicant moves forward with a project in mind, there's no design input from us related to that project. The applicant could provide information about it, and it would be on them to say, hey, we plan to do this, but it's not binding with us because we are taking no action. So
when a property is designated as a Class 1 historic site, aren't there contributing and non-contributing elements?
yes, that depending on the site, yes, that could be a way that a site could be addressed.
So in this case, just say, I know what Stephen Keelan's conclusions were, but let's just say it was now being assessed for Class 1 historic site designation afresh. The two buildings that Army and Davis designed could be identified as key and the others not.
That's correct.
That's part of the process.
That is correct. I think From a staff standpoint, in terms of our analysis, we looked at those buildings as well and said that they do not rise to that level of meeting the criteria, based on the designation. So that's why we are recommending that it doesn't, that we don't stay the project and designate that site. But, in terms of a larger site like this where you have multiple buildings, yes, you would have to go through and assess every single building to see if they are contributing.
See, the thing is, and I know there's opinions already that this doesn't rise to the level of significance as relates to architecture. Let's just think about a few things. Army and Davis were well known for doing unusual wall configurations and using a lot of different materials. These canted walls, the canopies with the interesting flaps, we call it the cutouts and the angled supports. The use of the extensive use of natural rock cladding, the unique design of the railings, all these are indicative of Army and Davis and the work they do. I can't think of too many other buildings in Palm Springs that have those elements. Now, they did design the former, which looks like a Denny's, but I guess it was Howard Johnson's. The one that's now part of the Ace. And that has some of these elements, which they, are very consistent with their design. So I'm still trying to think of other buildings in the city that have those types of elements, the canted walls, the amazing canopies, and the extensive use of natural rock. So that's why I'm thinking this might actually rise to the level of significance. These two buildings for those features. It's not just a run-of-the-mill commercial building design. So those are my thoughts, because I really can't think of any other buildings that look like that.
Further to the comment, it's obvious the stolen one listed on the survey. And now that this new information has come to light, we have documentation on the true Army and Davis building, which I believe should be added to the survey, which in effect would make the class 3 building. So Daphne, correct me if I'm wrong in that, but it would be nice if these two structures were added to the survey. And if we can't just simply do that, what do we need to do to add them to make them in effect class 3 rather than class 4? The comfort I have is now that we have this documentation, we know that anything related to those two buildings will more than likely come back to the board. But the question is this the time for us to say those buildings are class 3 rather than class 4? Do we make that determination now?
That, designating certain buildings, a separate status from the site isn't how that, inventory has operated. It's, a status that's presented to the entire site. And so we wouldn't go and, kind of break from that and identify two structures as a different status. I think what's presented before you today is really, if you want to stay the project, to pursue designation of the entire site, or if you want to, look at the findings to see if it rises to that, if it doesn't rise to that level of significance, and take no action. I think those are the two items that are before you. If it was a class 3 site, and if there is a major alteration or demolition, it would go through this process.
I'm going to fix that.
I have a clarifying question. I haven't reviewed, very somewhat recently, I have not reviewed the National Register, like guidelines or guidance on sites like this, where you're looking at a whole site, but it's a whole site, but there are really two primary buildings that we're talking about. Obviously, like understand that we'd be designating the whole site, but how do you typically evaluate that? How do you?
It would be the same process as any designation project, where you go through and you have to have elements meet the criteria for historic designation. And then so you would have to go through the full designation process.
But there's no special consideration, or not special as in ordinance wise, but in the guidelines to evaluate a site. There's multiple different buildings that were built at different times.
And I can. I mean, if you're talking about the National Register, but of course our ordinance doesn't necessarily have to meet those guidelines, but this would be looked at as a historic district for purposes of the National Register. And then you would look at all of the buildings and structures on it and determine which things would be contributing and non-contributing. In Peter's way of thinking, you might be able to say, that pretty much the whole site would be non-contributing except for those two buildings. I don't know about the pool.
I think the pool was added in the sixties.
So, and really, because even the site itself has been so disturbed over time in terms of, I thought it was really interesting. It was originally more of a motor court, where the areas that are now concrete where you parked your car to go into your unit. So I mean, practically, I can't see anything like that ever being approved at that level. The National Register, where they would take an entire site like that and designate it for the two buildings. I don't know, Peter's making some really sort of interesting, compelling points, and I really appreciate the fact that if those are really the two important buildings, that your intention is to save them. I don't know if we can worry about whether or not.
Mr.
5
Chairman,
years-
may I just kind of jump in?
Yes.
Okay. So taking member Maruzzi's hypothetical, what we have is we have something that has value aesthetically, right? It has value intrinsically to me, to my client who's in Boston. They came out, they saw it, they're like, we need to save this, right? And so that's always been the design charge, is to save the character defining elements of this building. So it would be marketing suicide to start pulling the stone off and taking the railings down and turning it into something that it isn't. So we have a resource here that has value. And so rehabilitating that value makes economic sense, right? And so the legacy continues, and just trying to stitch this property that's just, as everybody has seen, it's just gone through its paces. It's interesting that we're sitting here talking about a building that's almost 100 years old. This city does have the fortune of having these legacies that last long, long times. And so it's, we're sitting here thinking about what is the value of this and how do we save it? So there's never been any discussion that if the budget doesn't allow us, let's spend extra money to pull stone off the thing, or let's, redo a railing that's perfectly good as is, right? And because it's so beautiful, it would be unfathomable to me, even if I left, that somebody who wanted to cheapen the thing out would start taking things off and spending money to put new stuff on.
So logically, everything you're saying makes sense, and your clients and you have the right intentions. My thought process went beyond that, though. Having been on the planning commission, I know things change. Properties, developers don't have the resources, they sell the property, somebody else comes along, and look at downtown projects, 3 different owners, anyhow. So that, I'm not worried about that. So that's why I thought, well, what other solution is there? So that there's some assurance that even if things didn't go well, despite your best intentions, that those two buildings would have some sort of designation, so that we would once again get to review alterations to those buildings. So the way it is now, as it's been described, once we're done with this today, that's it. We don't have, that's it. You guys, you're on your own, and hopefully you do the right thing. But my experience in life isn't that sometimes the best intentions don't always come true. So I don't know, it seems like we really don't have much of a choice. We just believe that, and I still think that you can have the process of Class 1 historic site designation move forward with a result, or even, let's just say that the result was the whole site should be designated as class one historic site. Then the HSPB has the authority to say, well, we really don't agree with that, we really only think these two buildings rise to the level of significance. Correct, we would have that right as an HSPB to designate the site, but with only two contributing elements.
Correct, so, so the designation would still land on the entire 4-acre parcel, and you would have to qualify what is contributing versus not contributing.
Right, so then say the project moves forward and then another project moves forward, it would come to our attention, we would assess it based on whatever that project is, but we would have more jurisdiction over those two buildings than we would of any other part of the site, because the only two that were considered contributing were those two.
Well, the criteria would be applied on the entire site, so any development on the site would be assessed with the 4
Right,
criteria.
it would be assessed, we would assess it,
Correct.
and we can say, well, we don't have an issue with all the other things that these two buildings are concerned about.
Right, but yeah, and any new development that goes on the site, you would have to assess based on its impact to.
Okay, so bottom line. I would say it deserves to be assessed again. And I really like Stephen Keelan's work and I think he did a great job. I don't know if I agree with his conclusion, actually, I don't agree with his conclusion, but. I would like it such that the conclusion could be that 2 elements of that property are character defining and important. And should be considered differently from the rest of it. So I don't know if that's something that can be proposed.
Again, I think the,
I'm gonna interject here. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Leonard. I believe Rebecca has a comment. Would you like to turn it out, please?
Sure, just going back to this idea of designating a site, the one word that hasn't been uttered is integrity. And integrity is paramount to any kind of designation, and frankly, some things that are have a value don't have the integrity. This site, 2 things here. This particular site has this interesting history, and the original intent, which was never executed, is now in a contemporary iteration being executed, which I think is a very interesting parallel universe type of situation. The other thing too is that, and this goes back to what you were saying, Peter, is if this project, even if it were aborted midway, it would come back to us for further review simply because it would be a major alteration that would need additional approval. And that's a question to you.
Yeah.
so once a project is reviewed by HSBB, and it's deemed no action, then those projects don't come back to HSBB.
To clarify, let's just say we take no action, but let's say that the project was started and then it fell through, which I think is one of the aspects that Peter is addressing. A new project would have to come back before us.
So if it's a completely new, so it's not under an existing entitlement and it is a brand new project, it would still retain its class 4 status based on what's present, so yes.
And to further extrapolate there, let's just say that in 10 years, the owners see an opportunity to capitalize on their investment, sell it, and the new buyers wish to renovate. It comes back to us, correct?
That is correct in terms of it being a class 4 status.
I have a quick question. What was the proposed timeline? About expected completion date on this project?
We're moving quickly into construction documents. So after this meeting, the intent is that by June, we'd have plans filed with building and safety, public works, engineering, fire, and the planning department. And then hopefully in the early fall, we'd be under construction. There's some remediation that has to happen. There's some environmental issues that are just, they're gonna take some time to remove asbestos and lead paint and some of the
And
things that are going on.
you have an expectation from the fall when you begin of how long they can take from that point.
Well, I think we're all hoping it'll take 12 months. If we run into something that is unexpected, it could go to 16.
Does it not go before the planning commission?
It depends. So this project has the potential to be a modern architectural application because we're changing less than 20, we're adding less than 25% new floor area. So under that 25% threshold, the director of planning can designate this minor architectural versus a major architectural. But the planning director hasn't made that determination.
So it's discretionary in that sense. That seems odd, but.
Well, and we'll have to get the final plans to make any sort of assessment at that point for kind of the planning review portions.
The only reason I'm asking is because one for the planning commission, that's another opportunity for people as individuals to speak. But it's obviously not, we don't know about that.
Yeah, we won't know until we get the final scope to see what it would qualify as.
Member Hampton.
Yeah, just to clarify, member Hare's comment about coming back, so the class 4 designation stays
Correct.
with the property.
Right.
So then there is an additional, if this got aborted and now everything went away and they're starting over again, it's still a class 4.
What if it's, like in many cases, the entitlements remain, and so that, but the new buyer changes the plan? And that, it depends on how much the project changes and whether or not it needs to be, right, go before the process again, right? Even though it's entitled?
Yeah, and that can get pretty nuanced in terms of the design and what it triggers for whatever reviews it obtains. So if there's a planning review, it needs to be amended. So it's kind of a question that's difficult to answer because we don't have a project to assess it off of and what that process would be. I think generally speaking though, the class 4 status stays because it's incumbent on the construction date, and so if we have those there and there is a trigger for a major alteration or demolition, it would come back.
So I'm just, thinking of this whole property again as a whole. And the integrity of the property as a whole. And if we were going to look at those 2 buildings that were part of an unrealized plan, really what we would be doing is looking at them kind of in a vacuum as architectural specimens, because they don't represent anything where they are now other than architectural specimens. So it's difficult to think about that, but at the same time looking at the whole property. I don't know, and I just feel like to me, the intention of the ordinance and the criteria, it just isn't met for that property as a whole. If they were on their own parcel, but I'm not even sure, I'm not an expert on Army and Davis, but, we would have to compare them, not necessarily if there's nothing else in Palm Springs, but, really taking a good look at their body of work and, what this represents. I don't know, it's sort of a remnant partial piece of something to me. And I'm in this case, I'm actually inclined to agree with member Rosenau and Hare that I think in this case, we cross our fingers and hope you do the right thing. And I also see it as an opportunity really to I'm not exactly sure what your overall plans are, but public spaces, to actually maybe do a little bit of interpretation and let people know how important these buildings are as remnants of their work in Palm Springs.
I completely agree. The narrative of this project is just bolstered by having these buildings, including the 1930s building. I mean, the marketing of this thing, just weaving the thread through these eras in time, it's part of what's going to make this an attractive property. So, getting rid of them or altering them would just it'd be foolish.
So I'm prepared to also go with the staff recommendation on this.
Member Marcia, did you have something? Or no?
I was just going to, I guess I concur with, member Hare's points about the integrity and looking at the integrity and the considerations of the property as a whole. Right, and even, honestly, looking at the buildings in a vacuum. I'm not sure that or not in a vacuum, but the buildings, these two buildings themselves, that, that they meet the standards of integrity and significance for that the ordinance requires for class one.
I would disagree that those two buildings have low integrity, they have extremely high integrity. Except for some of the in the portions.
The site.
No, I agree with the site, absolutely. This is why it's been such a difficult issue for me, because. I mean, I'm very familiar with Armand Davis's work, 30 years worth of it, you know, I knew Alton Davis, and, you know, it's. I don't know what's going on about it, but this is, their work in Palm Springs is essentially non-existent, except for one other example. Just to have any Armand Davis buildings in Palm Springs is an amazing thing to me. So I can't support this, not because I don't agree with the project plan. I think it's a great plan, and if it comes through exactly as proposed, I think it's gonna be terrific. But I would just like to have found some way that the process could, since we're supposed to be evaluating this, as whether or not we think that it should go through the analysis of class 1 or 2, whatever we need to. I think it should go through that process. So that's, I'm gonna vote no on any kind of a motion that doesn't include that.
But it did go through an analysis.
Yeah, but he wasn't looking at it for that reason, and just I disagree with this analysis, we're not evaluating the analysis.
What, why would it, couldn't it be? Class 2 doesn't need to meet historic, I mean, I know some of our members feel it's a class 2 designation, but, class 2 status doesn't need, you don't need to meet historic. You don't need to, integrity standards necessarily.
Okay, can we get a reminder on the acreage of the site?
It's a little over 4 acres.
Okay, so I'm gonna remind people that this is at the, what some people on city council might call the northern gateway to the town. So this site will have huge visibility on Plum Canyon frontage. And it will be arguably the finish one of the more gleaming, beautiful projects in that part of town, which is sorely needed. Because it's quite the eyesore up there right now. So that's something to keep in mind. But you know, going back to the whole thing about if we take no action, this will never come before the HCPD again.
Again, it retains its class 4 status. If there is a new project that is completely different from what we've seen and it triggers those same triggers of demolition or major alteration, then it would trigger the same areas of the ordinance.
Okay, and in when a similar type of situation come up. Staff, not necessarily fellow union, but other staff members that if you have identified a building that is historically important and retains a high level of integrity and still has the defining features intact, you can complete DPI forms for those buildings and make sure that they get onto the survey. So in essence, you're taking a class 4, you're writing a DPI for those buildings, and then they are placed on the survey, automatically making them a class 3. Why can we not specify that that be done for the 2 Armand Davis buildings as part of our recommendation? That way, in the future, when something on the site comes before, those 2 buildings will in fact be class 3. Because you know the Waylands is telling us it's going to be about 8 months before they start, and it could be 9 or 10 months. You don't know, and then it's another year. So we're looking at 2 years here. A lot can happen in the span of 2 years. So I would prefer to see some level of protection given to those 2 buildings in whatever way we can.
Again, that's creating processes that aren't there. We have an ordinance that really lays out two paths for this. And it's not fair to the applicant to say that we're gonna create a special process for you because you have these 2 resources. I think we really need to make the decision based on our ordinance language to either stay the property and pursue the designation process, so that we can assess the entire site. Or we, look at the findings to see that the site doesn't meet the historic, findings for historic designation. Again, that's kind of the way the ordinance is laid out. And those determinations, again, are tied to how we do our CEQA analysis for these reviews. We can't start to create more processes, because the CEQA is saying, it's not a project, because we're either saying we're not taking any action, we're letting the project go through the regular planning process, or we're taking it through designation, which is also not a project. But once we start to commingle all kinds of processes, it will jeopardize that. So we either have the two. I think we need to make a decision on either staying or taking no action.
Great, thank you for that clarification. I think it's quite tricky, but I think we have all of that. We put in the machine now. Vice Chair Rosenau, did you have anything there?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I make the motion that we take no action.
Okay, any discussion on that? Any second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Rosenau to take no action and allow the project as proposed to proceed, and is seconded by Member Hare. Any further discussion or amendment to that motion? Okay, I'm gonna call for a vote. All in favor, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please say aye. So that was no. That was how many? Five,
You didn't ask if there are any opposing.
four,
Not yet.
and five for me. So 5 for aye and 1 for no. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you everyone for getting through that. At this time, I would like to ask for a very short recess, because we've been here since 4:30, and I think we need to put a stopping break, like 5-minute stopping break. We are back live. Thank you all for the 5-minute recess. And it is 6:26 p.m. We are restarting the Historic Site Preservation Board meeting of January 7, 2025. And our next item on the agenda is 5B, an application by the City of Palm Springs for the approval of a certificate of appropriateness minor, in order to reconfigure the breach gate and replace the interior flooring at the Donald Wexler Terminal at Palm Springs International Airport. A Class 1 site located at 3400 East Top of Canyon Way, HFPD number 70. So may we please start the staff report.
Before we proceed, I do have to ask, Member Maruzzi.
Oh, that's right, I have to scram.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Member Maruzzi will have to recuse from this, public, or this, item on the airport due to his involvement on the historic study related to the Wexler Terminal.
Am I supposed to depart physically from the premises?
Physically, if you could, just outside the doors.
I didn't bring a jacket.
No, just sit down.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll sit out like
Yeah, step outside.
bad
just-
child in the hallway.
Just in the hallway, and then we will
I was counting.
bring you back.
I'd forgotten that was the issue here. Okay.
Okay, so for the staff report, the next application that's before the board is involving the Palm Springs International Airport, specifically the interior public space of the Wexler Terminal. This is a Class 1 historic site, locally designated in 2009, and it was also listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2021. The request for a certificate of appropriateness is triggered due to the scope of work that impacts the interior public space of the Wexler Terminal, specifically the main lobby space. So the scope of work is twofold. One is to change and remove the existing flooring material that's in that lobby space currently. And that does include the terrazzo floors from 1991. And it's replacing the terrazzo finish with matching terrazzo that matches the historic appearance of the historic terrazzo. As part of this proposal, the applicant team matched a sample uncovered in one of the electrical rooms in the main lobby. And they proposed two neutral colors. The layout of the terrazzo and how it is to be divided it is not an exact replica, but it is lined for it to be distinguished and not to be confused with the original. Staff does, however, recommend that HSPB discuss the use of the brass dividers to determine if that material choice is in character with the original design. The second scope of work is related to the reconfiguration of the reach gate, which is the area that connects the secured area to the lobby. The extruded space as the connecting doors connect the secured area to the lobby was an addition that was added in 2005, 2006. But again, that portion of the breach gate does encroach into the interior space of the original lobby. Hence, this was included as part of this review. The exterior change is to a non-original elevation, and it includes the revolving doors on the land side elevation. The change out of those doors remain to be consistent in design with the surrounding elevation. Here is a comparison image from the 1966 historic image on the left. This is of the main terminal lobby space looking towards the mountains to the west. The image on the right was taken today by our airport planner, Nikki Gomez, showing the current conditions of the space and how it is not. You can see with that comparison that the terrazzo flooring is different and it's not original to what's in place right now. Next slide. So this is going to look very small, but they are plans that are in your packet, at least the right side. The proposal for the installation to match the terrazzo will extend throughout the lobby space into the TSA secured area, the baggage claim, which isn't fully shown on this slide, but it is in your packet material, and the ticketing area. The sample of the terrazzo is on the table for closer inspection. It's actually not on the table for closer inspection because I can't bring it. But I can grab that in a second. The plans for the reconfiguration of the breach gate, which is the next slide. Plans for the reconfiguration of the breach gate can be seen on this slide. The current layout is not in conformance with the security requirements, and the proposal will simplify the appearance and not adversely impact any historically significant features in the inside. Please note that the image on the bottom right, I think it says it's the west elevation that's actually taken from the interior, so it's not a west elevation on the exterior facade, it's the west elevation as you see it from the inside. So the criterion granting alterations to a class 1 historic site are as follows. As outlined in the staff report, staff finds that the entire scope of work meets criterion 1 in that the proposed alteration does not materially impair the historic features and meets criterion 2 by having an extensive portion of the proposal looking to restore historic material to the areas with most significance. The changes to how the terrazzo is being configured does deviate from the original drawings, but is consistent when it comes to patterns and textures. The scope of work will not be using federal funds. This particular scope of work is not using federal funds, but we do find that the work is consistent with the standards and requirements set in the U.S. Secretary of Interior standards. All right, here's for the next slide. Pulling out the portion that staff had recommended HSPB discuss related to the brass dividers. Staff finds that the project as a whole meets the necessary criteria for a certificate of appropriateness and recommends that HSPB approve the changes proposed within the interior space that is publicly accessible within the Wexler terminal. With that, I can conclude. I can take questions related to the staff analysis. I think we have the entire airport team here to answer any questions that you may have regarding the proposed project.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. Does the board have any questions for the staff based on the report at this time? Something else?
Just, what was the overall impetus for doing this again? I know said some of it doesn't meet security requirements.
For the breach gate, I believe it's to bring it into compliance with the current security requirements. And we do have the airport team, so they can explain a little bit on how this particular scope of work has been assessed and brought to us.
And removing the flooring, was that an actual attempt to restore?
I think that it is an attempt to,
I mean, was that the rationale for the removal of the flooring?
I believe so, and we can have the airport team come up and address that question. But there were reports done related to aspects of restoration that would be recommended, and that was part of those recommendations.
Oh, and just, I'm sorry, I've just, reports done by who?
There was a historical assessment report that was completed at the beginning, and Nikki can actually, okay.
Good evening, Commissioners, my name is Nikki Gomez, aviation planner, so there was a cultural report that was, that we had created specifically for the package clean portion, which also included the flooring in that section. And part of that section was where it was recommended that the terrazzo flooring was included. And so it kind of piggyback right on that comment in which now we are we have the opportunity to include the entire terminal, and therefore we presented it as a whole.
And who did the report, if I can ask?
It is LSA.
Oh, LSA, okay.
Are we now directing questions to?
At this time, it's a question to staff, and then we'll let the applicant do their full presentation if they have anything else to present, and then you can ask the applicant any questions you have.
I reserve.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Sarah, for that great presentation. We don't have our own presentation, however, I think it's concluded well enough on that presentation, kind of straightforward and exactly the scope of work we want to do. That's the terminal terrazzo, and it's thinking about it holistically and installing it holistically as well, which includes the breach gate as part of that. That includes the TSA, that includes the ticketing area. So it's a very comprehensive way of looking at it. As I presented before, that we're now going to look at this building very thoughtfully and present it as a kind of a so not piecemeal type of work that we're going to do moving forward. So that's pretty much it. And we do have our on-call architect with us for any very specific question on materials and installation.
Go ahead and pass around the sample too.
Thank you. What you doing that?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the referencing the plans right now where it's the terrazzo replacement plan. So the breach gate replacement is sort of like an addendum, almost like a part of a larger, like you said, like a larger plan to replace all of the, like the carpeting that's in, the main terminal and the ticketing areas. And it seems like it's that TSA area as well.
The reason why the breach gate is kind of separated is because it includes the gate system itself. And that gate system is sitting on the flooring, and therefore they will come together and be installed kind of as one, but it's still includes the flooring, and so we wanna make sure that essentially it's together but separate for the type of work that it entails, because it's essentially a little bit more, how do you say, it is a different scope, and so we wanna make sure that that breach gate doesn't get tied up with the flooring. That it kind of lives on its own, but matches the flooring itself. I'm sorry if I.
Yeah, so kind of a follow-up question to that. So the plan for the rest of the floor, just so I understand, so the plan for it's the TSA. TSA terminal, the North Ticketing Hall, and the baggage claim, these are all, these same materials that you're proposing for the breach gate, all the same.
That is
Okay.
correct.
Are those just two alternative choices, or are they
So-
both being?
So the darker colored version are placed on a high traffic areas. Those are gonna be around the ticketing and around the baggage claim area, so, and then the rest will be that lighter color, so. Just so that we kind of address some areas and there's some definitions in the space.
So to follow up on that comment you just made, I was aware of that and I've been to many airports. I travel a lot, and most recently to Phoenix. And the Toronto doesn't change color based on high traffic or low traffic areas. So I get why you're doing it, but can you explain maybe a little bit more of what the reason was to do two colors as opposed to one color everywhere? Because, typically, the prevailing sentiment among conservationists would be that you would restore it all back to one color throughout.
Sure, Neil McLean with Gensler, the on-call architect for the airport. To answer your question really quickly, so we were trying to create some variation in the design, so we just didn't have one color everywhere. And we were trying to highlight the different functional parts of the area. So circulation is one color, so that's the main piece that takes you across from ticketing, the main entry over to back. And then the dwell spaces, we have the secondary color. So in bag claim, eventually, there's a second color in there. There's a second color in the TSA as well as itself, because it's a separate function. That was really just trying to bring some variation into the design.
Okay, and the lighter one is the one that matches, or more closely matches what was there originally?
Yes,
Okay, great.
Great.
And one more thing, it's hard to tell from the rendering, but, at the current breach area where the revolving door is. Correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like the trough goes out back.
You mean when you look at our design plan or in reality today, it doesn't go outside.
I'm just looking at the
design.
sheet note with the drawing, it's hard for me to, oh, yeah. The Toronto and in back, or does it go outside as well?
Take a better plan.
Yeah,
Back up over here. Sorry.
Sorry.
So this is this the little piece in question to you at the very end there?
Mhm.
That is, so it's concrete outside. That triangular piece, actually in our design, if you look closer, it's a walk-off mat. So it's a built-in integrated walk-off mat. So when people come in, so they can walk off the dirt on their shoes. Down, it is the terrazzo flooring itself.
So
Just-
the line at which the Toronto and there's a perfectly straight line.
Yeah.
And triangular part here, a mat, a brush,
Yeah, it's a mat.
foot scraping kind of thing, okay.
Typical thing that you see when you enter into a building, to remove the dirt from your shoes.
And that foot scraping, that thing is outdoors or indoors?
It's indoors.
Indoor.
Yeah, so we have diagonal, here's a better look at it. You know, this is indoor space, that's the space we're talking about.
Okay.
And we have those existing doors that come to the point.
Okay, that clarifies a lot, thank you.
Sure.
I have a question about the location of the breach doors. Now, when you're in the terminal, and I tried to figure this out in the plans, I'm sorry, I couldn't. The two revolving doors are at the far end, they're recessed quite under that mezzanine. Do the new breach doors come out to the edge of the mezzanine, or
So we're doing a couple of things. We're trying to get them as underneath the lowered ceiling as much as possible. They're a little longer, so we're extending the lowered ceiling on this side to take us to this mullion here, so we capture that breach gate activity, but they come just a little bit further into the space itself,
Into
into the terminal side of it, yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, they have multiple functions. They're obviously to keep people from getting to the secure side of the airport. They can be shut down in different ways. They can be opened up. They allow more passengers to come through the terminal building than the current revolving devices do. So it
Right.
improves circulation.
And I guess you're adhering to specific codes and security mandates by extending them out into that larger lobby space?
Yes, it's the design and function of how they work, the amount of space you need between people, because you can turn it into like a sally port device where you walk into one space, a door closes behind you, you're in security, the next door opens and you can exit out through it. So it's the design size of it based on TSA standards, based on meeting security criteria.
Okay. And my second question, take it back from staff recommendations. Can you comment on the brass dividers versus a more historic restoration?
Okay, what I will say, I don't know what the divider was originally, quite frankly. But I will say we selected the brass divider because we have a warmer palette of materials that we're looking at across the airport. So in these spaces, the matrix in the terrazzo itself has a warmer color, and we wanted the brass color to be a warmer environment to work with that color. And it's also part of it's integrating something across those spaces connected through all the different areas. And I leave it like that. It's a design decision, it's a design selection.
So in looking at the historic photograph, is the lack of divider in there merely a function of the fact that you can't see it, that the camera couldn't see it, or?
In the
Do we
particular
know?
photograph that they have, there is a divider pattern in there, and that particular photograph does not show it very well.
Yeah, you can see.
It's these very faint lines.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't know if yeah, it's
No, I
there.
can't, but okay.
Yeah.
What is the material?
So it's a divider strip of some sort. One assumes it's a zinc divider strip. Maybe it was a white metal. I really don't know.
It does seem to me that brass is so contemporary at this point in time, and certainly will stand out. It will call attention to itself. And going back to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You keep going.
Well, and also to reiterate what Chair Nelson said regarding the design choice to use two colors. I kind of am simpatico with the feeling that a single color is a more authentic nod to restoration. When especially other compromises will have to be made in the totality of this project. Just to bring it up to current use and future use standards, how can we maybe mitigate those choices as much as possible?
Could I offer one idea to start with?
Sure.
When the terminal building was originally built, backplane was an exterior function. It had a concrete floor. We didn't have a security screening checkpoint, different standards, a different time. All of the spaces that were originally part of the building, we're putting in the one color. The new spaces are the ones where we're getting the secondary color, the SSCP and the backplane itself. And if that helps modulate that in your mind at all, if that changes that position for you. But that's one thing I would offer.
Okay.
And then I'm sorry, you had a follow-up.
Well,
question.
and I would say that does make some sort of sense to me, that because you're subtly indicating originality versus a contemporary renovation. And the other, we were talking about the brass,
Yeah.
and you know, versus something that is perhaps not so brilliant. I don't know. You should have an opinion about this, Jan.
Yeah, I was, which of those is more? Is the gray more, which one's more akin to the historic floor?
Lighter.
Okay, so that would be used in. What would be the historic areas? And this,
That's our main field. Yes.
and it is sufficiently differentiated. It would look like a nice flow, but you would still know that you're stepping on. Yeah, okay, I like that, but I really have a concern with the gold as well. I really think it should be more in line with the look, even if I realize you may not be exactly sure what the material is, but. Of the original, I just think the whole, it would just flow better throughout the whole space.
I really can't think of mid-century modern architecture using brass in terms of you know, metal fittings, whether they're for mullions or windows, doors. I could be wrong about that, but that's my feeling.
You observe, look around at the different colors and materials that you'll see from that period, and it's not all as we think of it sometimes.
Right.
So just, you know, that's all I know for you.
No, I get it, but I have reviewed a lot of houses for historic site designation and from that period. I don't recall ever having brass called out for fittings or that sort of thing. Anyway, that's just my feeling.
I have a question with regard to the CEQA analysis, which now talks about the class 31 and the project meeting the Secretary of Interior standard. Was that assessment done by you at the staff level?
Yes.
At the project, okay, so there was no other analysis or anything, and then what about, Peter left the room, were there subgroups or committees that met discussing the historic?
I think as part of the report that was submitted, there was a subgroup that helped aid that report.
The report that LSA did?
Yes.
Okay, and he was part of that?
Correct.
I was kind of relying on him. I didn't realize he was gonna leave the room.
I think that Stephen Keelan and Gary Webster also helped with that.
Oh,
group.
okay,
I just
and
from
neither
what-
one of them, Steven's not on the line, is he, by any chance? No, it doesn't.
People, any other.
So it doesn't look like we have any public register to speak on the item as a concern.
We don't see any messages that are up, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, people thinking on, I was in the airport, back in the WDs, but we remember a little bit of the original architecture and implementation. And, remind you that from this period of in the 60s, but was becoming quite common. And I personally have seen quite a few homes, and building, throughout Southern California and the nation, and even from where Drive was being used, 5 to 6 feet in the. So I think we went back and out, get away, so you might support the argument that Drive could be okay here. Although I do completely understand and sympathize with the idea that, you know, we think of stainless steel, we think of, you know, we think modern, but this is clearly mid to late 60s. So things have changed and they were embracing more of the organic, natural things, and kind of fall into that category, the good tones, that kind of thing. So I can see both viewpoint, and I'm just trying to put it out there that I don't have an issue. So, but I did want to just bring up real quickly, on pages, 19 through 23, the staff report with the images and drawings and the rendering of the increase to the breach, the ELBC, aka exit lane breach control devices. It calls out from the material and how it's been built and that kind of thing. So it appears that there's a rubber base at the bottom of each breach. And I'm just concerned at the tightness and what seems to be like a claustrophobic type of a feeling. Because obviously this is the first time people enter the airport building when they've landed. In many cases, the first time they ever visit anyone. But so it's their first impression that Donald Webster building, which is the important class 1 site. So usually when you have terrazzo, it's in these big wide open spaces and it's easy to clean and get to. But here you have it in the very confined breach channel. So my question is, have you worked through how it can be cleaned? Because that cleaning equipment for that terrazzo is typically very big and massive. So last thing we wanted for the customers arriving to our international airport in a beautiful place like Noel and having the terrazzo floors and the breach channel be left in perfectly clean. So was that thought through or worked out? Because I have seen in other airports where the terrazzo in fact goes through security and you walk through these type things, but the terrazzo is not in clean, then it's always been an issue for me because I think first impression matters.
So I'll say one thing, then I'll turn it over to Nikki. Terrazzo is a very easily cleanable floor with a pH neutral cleaner. You can clean it in many ways. You don't need special equipment to do that. So it should be able to be cleaned easily. Those are spaces that protocols will have to be developed for the cleaning staff to address. But I don't know if there's anything more you want to add to that, Nikki or Jeremy.
Good evening, my name is Jeremy Keating, I'm the Assistant Airport Director at the airport. So we think this is a huge improvement to what we currently have. So we don't feel like there's going to be any issue with cleaning the terrazzo because I think everyone agrees that the carpet is pretty bad. And we've been working on this for a number of years since I've been here to get rid of the carpet and bring back everything back to terrazzo. So we're really, really excited about this project of restoring the whole Wexford, terrazzo.
Motion.
Yeah, I have a question. What's under the carpet right now?
Combination of things.
Well, so as you see in the central area in the earlier photograph, carpet was reinstalled probably 10 years ago. Terrazzo was replaced about 20 some years ago. The original floor plans tell us that there was terrazzo on the hallway down to back lane, and that there was terrazzo on the ticketing side as well. One presumes those finishes are still there, but one does not know the quality or condition of them. And even when they pulled up the carpet in the central space here, there's a lot of age that shows on that, even though it's not that old. But one presumes based on those floor plans, because it was an original layout, that there was some kind of terrazzo flooring there.
And that might still be there.
Might still be
There
there.
might be some there, and it's probably more of an architectural, how do we be consistent, right? You can, it's probably Neil can probably talk to that a little bit more about trying to restore old terrazzo with other parts of the building that don't have any terrazzo, right? And so we're trying to design it in a consistent so that everything is the same.
I support that if that was your question. I don't know where you were eventually going, but
Yeah.
yes, we want continuity.
What, if not knowing the condition of the terrazzo flooring beneath, if it happened if we approved this plan, HSBB approved this plan, and you went to, you know, rip up all the carpeting and lo and behold, the Troxel isn't like decent shape, like it's not, it wouldn't be like the easiest thing in the world, but you could make it work again. What is there would you come back to us? What would be the process be like for uncovering something like that?
So I don't have a direct answer to your question, and then I understand what it's based on and the desire, if there's something original there. I would just reinforce the fact that when we are planning and designing this, we're having it done all at the same time, so we have continuity across all those spaces. So we have the same quality of terrazzo, we have the same look across the spaces, and we have the same divider pattern.
But
So
isn't part of the, sorry, yeah, I understand that, and isn't part of this, the you know, or at least what the proposal to us was that we're sort of dividing off very visually what would have been the original terrazzo from what would be not original terrazzo. So I guess my reply back would be, well, why wouldn't that be? You know, you could use the original material and have the effect, it wouldn't be consistent, but this isn't consistent either, because you are making a visual delineation in this plan as well.
Well, not all, so all the area that we proposed doing the original look terrazzo, there's not necessarily terrazzo there. It's a lot of hopscotch, right? Because baggage claim never had terrazzo. Ticketing wing, parts of ticketing wing have been added, so that doesn't have terrazzo, so we're proposing to bring it all consistent.
I believe member had a comment.
So I'm a little confused now. I thought that the carpeted areas were originally concrete but we are having continuity with El Terrazzo. It sounds to me like now some of the carpeted areas originally had terrazzo, which may be there. And I'm wondering if any kind of excavation has been done to not only determine what's there, not so much in terms of reuse or rehabilitation of that surface, but even to figure out what the lines were for the dividers, so that you could actually reconstruct an original dividing pattern. And in which case, I'm wondering if this photograph has been, I mean, you can do some amazing computer work with photographs, and if there really are lines there, has anyone done an analysis to figure out if you can actually recreate the original pattern?
So lots of questions right there. The first question seemed to be about, well, the one I'll answer is, without pulling everything up, how did we know what the pattern was originally in the space? So there's a drawing that's shown in the package. Then we went back to the archive at the Art Museum, the Donald Webster collection, we pulled those drawings. So that's how we got an indication of what the original pattern was. It wasn't from the photographs.
Okay.
It was really from, it's this drawing here.
Okay, I missed that, I apologize.
This drawing is actually, it's not the floor plan drawing, I think it's reflected some drawing or something here, but you know, we have a drawing that shows how the terrazzo was from spackling outdoor space, but it's inside here in these spaces that we used to create that. Now, we took some liberties with that. We are not recreating the exact same layout. We are expanding it, but we're creating the same unity, and we're using the device that he used in the center was kind of the diamond patterns. And then when we came out to the edges, it became squares in the hallway here, and then down into the. So we turned that into rectangles, but we are using the diamonds, we're radiating out. We're setting that as the essential pattern that we're basing it on right now. So that was one set of questions. How did we know what it was? Because of the drawings.
Okay, and that is comforting to know that the drawings exist and you're being used.
And then the second part is, what Jeremy is saying is some of these pieces, there was an expansion in this area, there's probably a hodgepodge of what the terrazzo was over here at one point in time. We certainly know that this was all replaced in the early 1990s. Carpeting was replaced here. I don't know how long ago they took this out of terrazzo, but we haven't like looked into that. But again, there have been movements and changes to this, so there might be big areas that would have to be reproduced. let's say.
My thrust is not so much that I have any hope that there would be anything that's salvageable there. But, again, my question is, when you found this piece of terrazzo in the electrical closet, it's sort of like, maybe there's an existing divider somewhere still in that floor yet to be discovered that could be more accurately used, even if it isn't a warmer color.
Sure. I'll leave it at that.
I'm getting interject here for a minute. I feel like we're maybe nitpicking a little too much here. I just want to say, in response to the concern voiced by each two members, that, I've seen a lot of, terrazzo here in the desert, that was poured all the way from post World War II, late 40s, all the way to the early 70s. And whether it's 40, 50, or 60 years old, almost all of that original terrazzo had cracked like crazy. And terrazzo method and ingredients have changed from the mid-century period. They're much more durable and resilient. They bring epoxy into the terrazzo, and back then it was composed primarily of non-flexible, more rigid material. So I mean, I've been in beautiful homes here, Don Wetzel homes that were built in the 1960s. With a lovely client, and the original terrazzo floor, and the client made a very difficult decision to remove the entire floor from the house, partly because the plumbing was down there under the floor in the slab, but also because there were cracks that they just could not match. The terrazzo repair people would come in and give them quotes and be like, we can do this and we can fill this in, but it's never gonna look right. So I would argue that because the methodology has changed, and because the material has changed, that the discussion is somewhat moot about finding the original pieces and salvaging them and trying to match them. Because what we want, obviously, is something continuous, uniform, clean, beautiful. So that's all I have to say now.
It was a question, I was curious, and I am convinced. I do share the concern about the brass not having the rest of the material palette that you're planning for, that the plan is for the rest of the airport. I do share the concerns about the brass.
Sarah, what was the impetus for asking us to comment on the brass?
I think that, we have a sample of the terrazzo match. We didn't have any data related to the brass. I think it was stemming from the same observations of just looking into the space where we see mostly, an aluminum clad scenario within the airport. Without that additional information, it really comes down to, making a decision. And I'm wondering if there is a way to look at a potential location and condition an approval to see if we can find more of a match in terms of investigation, to see if there is a match that we can be more consistent with the original material. I don't know if the original plans actually call out the dividers themselves as a material, if we've looked into that specifically.
There were probably just a generic call out is what I recall at the moment.
Okay. But yeah, without that information, I think we wanted.
On the report that LSA did, that there was a committee that commented or had input, was that part of, it wasn't to that level of detail?
Real quickly, there was primarily one firm that was working together back then at Port Terrazzo. It was called Williams Terrazzo. And Williams Road in the industrial area up of Vermont is named for the owner of that company. And he did most of the terrazzo project, including houses and the solar farm, So, and I have seen original drawing that Don put in, and he called out everything. So he would have specified whether something was glass, something steel, he would have specified most detail right down to the nitty gritty. And that's something the applicant can't find, I'm sure very well, to that aspect. See, because sometimes those call out or details were in, accessory documents.
Can we do phone a friend? Can we phone a friend? Gary?
I do wish that the choice of brass was based on something more factual than just a design aesthetic. It would, I love your rationale for the two tones, it works for me. But, you know, just the other doesn't.
The original architect got to pick a color.
He did.
Was he asked about the gold? The original? It's Mr. or any of the Wexlers involved or Stephen Keelan. I don't know. I just feel like I'm not really qualified to say whether I think that should be brass or something else, quite honestly.
Well, do you have any further discussion on that?
For me.
Okay, I am going to make a motion.
Wait, sorry.
Oh,
Wait,
I-
just before you go.
Oh,
If
sure.
we approve it right now, do we approve the brass?
So currently, as it's presented, yes, it would be the palette that's presented before us, unless there is a motion to add a condition or change those.
Is there some way that we could, yeah, maybe just add a condition that there maybe be a little bit more research into what the material might have been? And I don't even know, would that come back to us just as an information item, or what would happen if that was a recommendation? Rather than just approving that, to consider, you know, an alternative.
before we stipulate that, they need to clarify the extent of the discussion or the research or that had with Stephen Keelan, Dave Wexler, but then there was part of subcommittee about these kind of details. So surely, you know,
That did not come up, it just, the terrazzo material is the only thing that came up. But I think at that time, we weren't looking into that much detail. So the direction was just to, honor the terrazzo material.
who selected this? Do you have a designer you're looking at? Or?
We are the designers, so
Okay.
we're the
I'm sorry,
architect.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
okay.
we selected it.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was the rationale for the brass?
Again, it was part of the whole color scheme for warming up the terminal buildings,
Okay.
and we thought that there was a lot of warmth in the terrazzo that we saw there. And we wanted to, you know, bring that out in the divider strips itself.
So do you have a subcommittee that's still active?
And, you know, upon the completion of that, report, then with that, recommendations, then that report is completed.
Yeah, I guess, like I said, my discomfort is just, I don't really feel like, I'm not a designer. I just don't feel like I'm qualified to flat out say, yeah, let's do that, perhaps.
Well, I
I think it would look nice.
understand you're not feeling qualified, and I would have to say I'm probably in that boat too, but I do feel like we're qualified to ask the questions.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big question in a way, even though it's a small detail in the overall scheme, you know. And Palm Springs doesn't need warming up. Cooling off is maybe better.
So could we make a motion to approve the project with regard to the types of terrazzo flooring and the proposed locations, and then have a condition that there be some additional research on the, what is that, what do we call that? The filler?
The dividers?
Dividers, the dividing material. Perhaps, you know, with regard to what it was, or at least what the look of it is, you know, in terms of color and texture. And would we say that that would come back to us for another final decision? That's why I was asking if your subcommittee was still active. I would have been fine with saying, you know, this can go to a committee
I'm
that already been
in
involved.
favor of that, to put it out there, so
Okay,
that's okay.
no, that's fine.
So. I feel like the airport, come up and research on this, I don't think we need to hold it up for the delay. But if that's the motion you would like to make,
No, I'm trying to figure out what we would all sort of like. I think maybe to lighten it up, we could approve the project as proposed and just make a recommendation that there be some other considerations of the divider material.
I think that would be a nice thing to do. I don't think it would have any effect. And
Mine, think of-
We committed to.
I mean, I like this project and I think everything is really good about it and I wanna support it. I just like a little more due diligence on that particular aspect.
I'd be uncomfortable just making that as a recommendation. I think, I don't know, I have found a lot of times that, you know, people go back and go, "Oh, okay, you know, you're the designer, I can consider some other things." I don't know, I'd be comfortable enough doing that so that we're not holding it up. And I know you're comfortable with it as proposed.
And I would go along with Janet on the recommendation, no matter how.
okay, so. I'm confident that this, because it's a pretty bad progress, that they're gonna do the right thing. And they took the time to be here tonight, to listen to all the comments that are high value, and they all mean something, and I think you know that. And we appreciate that, so thank you for listening to us.
How are you gonna do
We're
all that?
patient, I know it can be frustrating.
Just a practical question, it's gonna be a lot of, like, a little bit at a time, kind of a thing?
Oh,
It's pretty
for
fun.
the summer, how it's being installed. Yes.
Yeah, summertime.
It's installed in phases during the low season.
Yeah.
We're trying to get started in June. Multiple phases are going to be in parallel with one another.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the application by the provisional and for the approval of the certificate of appropriateness minor. Reconfigure the breach gate and replace the interior flooring proposed at the Rockford terminal of the Concord International Airport, the platform site located at 3400 feet top of Canyon Way. With the recommendation to please do a little more research into what the dividers may intend. Is that,
And
Do I have a second?
take that into account.
Yeah, to do additional research and explore potential options.
so we got a motion by Chair and we have a second, please.
Second.
Who? You did? Thank you. So you've all heard the motion in a second, maybe we have a vote, please. On David?
Bye.
So the motion carried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2,
One absent.
1.
Yeah. One abstain. Whatever you call it. What do you call it when they look? Yeah,
Recusal.
abstention.
Okay, thank you for that very well. Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
So, someone could just let member move, you know, that you can come back in.
You actually
Wait.
He's gone home. Find it out.
That is the governmental equivalent of a pinky promise.
Yeah.
Those are binding. Yeah.
Okay.
I went home, took a nap, here I am.
Had dinner, couple of drinks.
Okay, let's move on, please. This is the time of the agenda for discussion, beginning with board member comments. These are just general comments by the board, does anyone have anything to add at this time? I have been in discussion with staff about writing the letter to the council. Based on concerns that were brought up at the last meeting. And we staff have a lot of nobody, and we all know. So we are working as diligently and as quickly as we can to get a draft of that letter written, and I will let staff take over at this point and get all of their comments and reports.
Alright. If you don't mind, I'm gonna actually address the letter, as a second comment. We do have, on the line, and I know that I grossly miscalculated what time we would, be up for this item, but Dick Burkett is on the line, to provide us with an update on the HSPB symposium. I'm gonna actually pass around the, symposium programming that Dick and Neva have been working on with staff. And so that item is going around. Presentation. And then on the screen, we'll have the HSBB symposium schedule. So Dick is online to answer any questions that you may have. The program has just been passed around for the upcoming symposium. On the screen, we will project the timeline of tasks to be completed for us to be prepared for our April symposium. The board did make the decision to break last year from a successful program that we had in 2023, which makes 2025 the 10th symposium that HSBB has put on for our community. This event is, as we all recall, a half-day event this year with the reception is what we are planning, as you can see on the programming. In discussion with the director, as a half-day event and as a 10th kind of symposium, we do feel that the reception would be a better attended event. I think we had a reception planned for the 2023 event, but there were a lot of things going on. There were site visits, there were multiple days. But I think that we can use this reception to highlight the 10 years of the symposium. So that is being worked on as part of the 2025 symposium. We will begin to wrap up the tasks leading up to the event. Staff will reach out for member participation based on the items that will need to be completed between now and April. Again, you can see on the preservation matters timeline on the screen there. January, February will kind of be doing a lot of logistical things. I think generally speaking, we are working off of a template that we've used for past symposiums. So when we have our event registration available, when we do our materials, and then also making sure that the right save the dates and information goes out to the general community about the event. So we'll start to revamp all of that. Along with that, the HSPB symposium is also an opportunity for the board to present awards to potential projects or members of the community. And so I will be sending out the criteria related to the awards. So there will be a lot of things kind of coming our way related to the symposium. And the preparations thereof. Dick is on the line if you wanted to go ahead and add on to the details related to the planning.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. This is a great opportunity for us to share some more details about the event. A couple of clarifications before we get going is for the Preservation Matters event, the content and presentations are being provided by representatives of preservation organizations in our area. The only duplicate speaker for our Modernism Week symposium is the Alliance is partnering with the Palm Springs Art Museum, is really Alan Hess. However, his content will be different and will be geared more to preservation. All speakers are reconfirmed, except for Kate Anderson. But in my most recent interfacing with her, she will get back to me soon on regarding the tribal council's approval. I filled out all the paperwork that was necessary that she needed. I have a positive feeling this will all work out, but I will definitely stay on top of it. If there's any changes, I will get back to Sarah and then so that she can communicate to you. I'd like to just say that the goal this year is to streamline the event so that it is more manageable going forward and minimizes both staff and board time. As you all know, this event is rather personal to me, so I am so happy to see that there is the possibility of it continuing to move forward, but we do need to make it more simplified. The workflow program that Sarah's developed is really a great addition to the many templates that we have previously established and are available as you go through the different aspects of creating the program. And it delineates clearly the city and the board responsibilities and that of the production team. And that allows everything to move smoothly. So we're happy to answer questions. If there are those that affect the production team from a bandwidth standpoint, I will refer those to Deborah. So what questions do we have? Any comments? Seeing none?
So the date for the symposium, we had a question from the audience. The date for the symposium for 2025 is scheduled for April 26th. It's a Saturday, and the time is from 1 to 5, and it's going to be at the Palm Springs Convention Center.
And the reception would follow after 5 o'clock.
Well, I just wanted to thank Dick and Deborah for taking this on. It gave all of us who've been on the board for a while a nice break. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this sort of smaller, less complicated format works this year, and how we can keep it going in subsequent years. So thank you for all the time that you two and whoever, all the other people that you're working with put into this.
Thank you. It's an honor.
We wouldn't have this demand if it wasn't for Dick Buchanan.
No, we wouldn't be doing this if not for Dick.
Anything else?
I will, seeing that there are no other follow-up questions, obviously, if you guys have questions based on what you have, you can forward them over to me. And we can, and I'll discuss those details with Dick and Deborah and their team. And we will continue to move forward with the projected timeline that's been set up. And again, I think as we move forward and there are more tasks to be delegated, I probably will reach out to our board generally, requesting for any assistance.
Was that timeline online? Did I miss that, or did you just have it tonight?
I think it was just on the screen, but I will go ahead and
Yeah,
send
if
that
you
over
could get that to each
yeah.
of us, that would be great.
Yeah, this wasn't something that was provided in the packet.
Okay, thank you.
And my topic won't just be on gas stations in general, but the tramway gas station, the visitor center.
Difference between lead and unleaded.
Didn't we have one called, what was, it had that woman's name, like that's.
All right, Thank you, Dick, for staying on for such a long time for that piece. And I will follow up with you on our next items for January. Moving on to the next staff comments. Nelson, Chair Nelson did touch on this. I sent an email following up on a question about communication protocols with City Council, and was notified that best way to instigate that communication with the City Council would be through a letter. And so I wanted to first confirm that that is something that the board collectively wishes to proceed with.
You want to vote?
The nod will be fine. Okay. So with that confirmation, staff will work on a draft letter with the chair to confirm the contents of what was expressed during the meeting in December. I would also like to further clarify the confirmation I received regarding the dissemination process for the letter. This will not be a public action. It will actually be up to the City Council if they wish to pursue further discussion after reading the letter provided by HSBB on the topics that are brought before them. So I did want to clarify that because I did get that confirmation. And again, I'll be working with the chair. We are trying to get that started as quickly as possible so that we can get that out. We will likely be sending an email confirming the final letter before it goes out. So please keep track of your city emails for that update. The next thing that I have on the list here is related to some of the project updates that were requested during the last meeting, specifically the Orchid Tree Town and Country, the Racket Club property were the projects that were mentioned during this meeting. So, generally speaking, these are private properties, and they are in various states of discussion with the city. And based on the information I received, I'm gonna go down. Based on the information I received for the project on Orchid Tree today, the site actually does have entitlements and a TOT related agreements that are currently under active discussion between the city and the owners. And so at this point, staff is awaiting clarification. Once we have that formal decision, I will provide that update to the board, but at this time, that was the clarification I received today. So there are entitlements and TOT related agreements that are under discussion that are active. So again, once I have a clarification on the final and formal decisions that will be made publicly, then I would update you with that information. Town and Country and the Racket Club sites, based on what we have information, based on the information that I received, currently they are sites that are being monitored, but I was informed that there is no active violation present based on the code language that we have in place. I would like to note that these are properties that are on the radar of staff, and we are provided different levels of updates on some of the properties related to monitoring. And again, with these properties, I don't have a monthly update to provide you when we have updates related to any sort of progress or change or information that is coming from the applicant that we can disseminate. I will reach out to the board members with that information. And again, knowing that these are the 3 properties that the board is specifically interested in, I will provide the updates that I receive when I receive them immediately to our board members, probably in the form of the email communication that we have, so you have it when I have it. So again, the 3 properties that we have discussed that have come up have been staff's radar and will continue to be on staff's radar, and we will provide updates when they are received. Lastly, yes.
For what did you say was, it's the inspector, I'm sorry, what was the comment about that?
So the sites are being monitored but they have no active violations that are present based on the code language that we have.
So active violation means that no one has reported anything, or that they've been recently investigated, or what does it mean?
So that means that there are no active code compliance issues or anything that is going against any of the code reports. Let me see if I can rephrase that. The sites themselves don't have any sort of code violations that have been opened and are continue to be open or in process of getting addressed. They have no active compliance issues as of right now.
Okay, so this is no background as to whether or not they were inspected recently or anything like that, right?
I think that we do receive inspections for some of the properties. I can take a look to see if there is if you want information related to recent inspections, I can see when that's been completed. But
That would be helpful.
yeah.
I mean, if it's been 6 months or something, and then, for a year, I mean, who knows how long.
Yeah, and yeah, so I can see what information we can gather for that, but yeah, I can update you on that information.
That'll be helpful.
May I just ask you to explain what entitlements mean? This has been verbalized before, but I actually don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah, entitlements are, a lot of these bigger projects have had planning approvals that lock in a vested entitlement for development. And those run on different tracks and may have been extended over time. And again, they, given the history of these projects, may have multiple conversations and approvals.
Thank you.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to let everyone know is that you will be receiving an email, and you'll be receiving a couple after today's meeting, but just, summarizing different things. But one of those will be related to professional qualifications that will be required for the CLG annual report. So I did receive the documents for filling out the professional qualifications for our board. I will need those to be filled out and sent back to me so that we can include that in the annual report that we do for as a local government entity. And the deadline will be listed in the email, so if you can take a look at that and be sure to send that to me before the deadline. And I think with the CLG report file, which will be the requirement for applying for the CLG grant that we have been talking about. I haven't received the documentation for the grant proposals yet, but we're working. I did send out the one that we had previously, and we'll be updating you on when that grant information becomes available too. But with the professional qualifications, if you can fill that out and send that to me.
Do you have those? Because mine haven't changed. Can you just use the one from last year?
I know that they're typically dated, but I can take a look and see if it is something that we can reuse. If you, and I'll list it out in the email too, but typically they require a current resume, any sort of training that you've done in the past year that could be related to attending seminars, attending tours, those kinds of things. So I'll send that out. And if there isn't a date listed, we could probably use some of the documentation from previous years. So, that is it for me today. That was our first meeting, and I know that there was a lot on the agenda. HSPB cases are definitely loading up, so we definitely have a full agenda coming up in the next couple months. So site visits will be another thing that we'll be arranging for February. So again, another reason to keep on your city emails.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for following up on all those things that we asked about. repeatedly. I just wanted to close by thanking November Lucy for the article that he shared at the last meeting. I hope you all got a chance to read it. I just found it very informative. And I love the discussion around special purpose districts and intangible heritage, which I thought related a lot to that we reach. And really to lead to more discussion around the idea of public place, which we sometimes seem to be losing in some ways. So thanks for sharing that. I think anytime we ever see an article that, you know, resonates with us, we should share it for the good quality of our perspective. Okay, did anyone want to add on to that?
I completely agree, and in that, I emailed Sarah, an article, well, at least the first couple paragraphs of an article, that I found while doing some research in the Architectural Digest, or on Architectural Digest archive online. And it's an article from the September 1972 Architectural Digest, about a Palm Springs house, and I think you guys might enjoy it. It's pretty funny. The first paragraph is pretty funny.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, great. So with that, we will adjourn. The HSPD will meet again on Tuesday, February 4th, 2025, here at 5:30 p.m. Thank you all.
You know, that horrible Palisades fire is threatening the Getty Villa.